Hello and welcome, you're watching UATV News. My name is Inna Kosinska. Good evening. The state support for businesses forced to close because of quarantine restrictions. President of Ukraine has sent a bill on assistance to entrepreneurs in the red zones to Parliament's consideration. The financial assistance is planned to be set at the level of the average salary in the region. But who's going to finance this program and what do economists say about the effectiveness of such measures? Our correspondents know details.
8 regions of Ukraine and Kyiv remain in the red quarantine zone. Due to severe restrictions, cafes and restaurants, non-food shops and markets are closed. Small and medium businesses suffer the most. Volodymyr Zelensky ordered to develop a mechanism to help entrepreneurs get through difficult times.
All those measures cannot be introduced only in the format there are bans and no support, or according to the principle there is no money but you should hold on. It is logical that local authorities should also think about various forms of support when introducing a lockdown.
The mechanism of financial aid for businesses in the red zone was determined at a meeting of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities in the office of the President of Ukraine.
There will be an opportunity for entrepreneurs and employees of business entities whose activities are limited to submit an application via the DIA web portal for state services and receive a guaranteed payment of $280 from the state budget.
In the meantime, local communities will also be involved in funding the assistance for entrepreneurs. They are offered to add a certain sum for local budgets to those $280 paid by the state, so that the total sum makes the average salary across the region. For example, $450 in the Kyiv region and almost $500 in the Donetsk region.
We expect the local governments to introduce additional payments to support entrepreneurs and their employees. It will be a right and responsible step, and this will show the commitment of both local and central authorities to support people.
Yet in December of 2020, Ukraine has already employed a practice of one-time financial aid for businesses. Then the program was used by 500,000 Ukrainians. Economists say this time the support mechanism will be more effective.
The average salary is a more relevant sum than some $280, because this is closer to covering the loss of income for people who are staying in lockdown. While it's of critical importance, the previous support program did not come close to reaching those who were in fact affected by the lockdown due to a number of problems in the administration of this program.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has already submitted a corresponding bill to the parliament. The document prescribes the mechanism for receiving of payments by the affected entrepreneurs. Despite the fact that the parliament went into quarantine until mid-April, the MPs plan to study the document during extraordinary meetings. The law can be approved and signed just within some 10 days. Reported by Nick Starkov, Yulia Krychkova, UATV News.
Only Ukrainians are to decide how the democracy will work in their country. The draft law on local referendum was submitted for public discussion. Everyone can read it on the website of the parliament and offer changes. The final version of the bill will be drawn up, taking into account the citizens' comments. Our correspondents have studied the norms proposed and issues residents of different cities across Ukraine would like to submit to a referendum.
The use of community lands and public buildings, infrastructure and construction, peculiarities of the regional taxation systems and positions in local governments. Those are important issues Ukrainians are offered to discuss at local referendums. However, restrictions are also foreseen.
All issues that can be resolved at the national level cannot be resolved at the local level. There was such a manipulation, for example, with the Crimea. All issues concerning the territory are not the issues of a part of Ukraine. Those are questions for the entire Ukrainian people. Questions that contradict the constitution of the laws of Ukraine are not allowed.
Any local council or head of the community can initiate the referendum. Moreover, local residents could also obtain this right in case 10% of local population agree. They propose to include only one question to the referendum ballot, but this rule is still being discussed. As for the territories temporarily uncontrolled by Ukrainian government, as separate procedures foreseen by the document.
Local referendums can be held in uncontrolled territories, that is part of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions and the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, only after Ukraine regains control over those territories. The reintegration process cannot take place overnight. We need to form local government bodies, commissions, courts, etc.
We asked citizens from different parts of the country what questions would they like to put at a local referendum.
Issues of urban planning and architecture are very important. Something happens to prominent buildings and it is somehow resolved quietly, undercover. Something happens to parks and city development in general. I'm concerned about the ecology in our city, in particular the Koksahim plant, which pollutes the atmosphere.
Those could be the issues of improvement, of illegal development, issues of public places, places of rest. Well, a huge number of questions. I think residents who are active and have a public position could somehow address to the authorities. Here a monument to Lenin once stood, and now there are photographs of people who were in the east. I guess a memorial to those who died performing their duties could be placed somewhere here. Obviously, this issue should be submitted to a referendum.
All the suggestions for the bill on local referendums will be accepted until April 11. After that, it will be amended and submitted to the parliament.
I wouldn't expect this bill to be registered earlier than May, and I guess the vote can hardly be expected until autumn. I mean the second reading. Most likely this tool will start working only in 2022.
Putting a really working mechanism of democracy in Ukraine into operation was one of the main promises by President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Народовладдя в Україні буде.
There will be a rule of people in Ukraine. It is the duty of the state to provide citizens with comprehensive access to information for decision-making. People need to influence the relevant issues for their region and for the entire country.
The first step towards democracy has already been taken. On the 26th of January, the parliament approved the presidential bill on an all-Ukrainian referendum in the second reading, reported by Nick Starkov, Yulia Krychkova, UATV News.
A historical document. 7 years after Crimea has been occupied by Russia, Ukraine presented a strategy for the occupation and reintegration of the peninsula. President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree putting into effect the decision of the National Security and Defense Council. The document, which is already called the Roadmap, foresees methods to restore the Ukraine's territorial integrity. The plan for the implementation of the strategy should be developed by the Cabinet of Ministers.
Many aspects touch upon the violations committed by the occupation and administration of the Russian Federation in Crimea. Many aspects touch upon the violations committed by the occupation administration of the Russian Federation in Crimea, including causing harm to the environment, ecology and committing war crimes against humanity. The strategy is important, as it is the only positional document for all state bodies as a vision for common understanding of how are we moving along the track of the occupation and reintegration.
They are losing money. The Russian occupation authorities of Crimea are trying to solve the problem of water shortage. The so-called head of the peninsula, Sergei Aksyonov, announced that there is no longer any need for regular headquarters meetings. The situation with the water supply has allegedly stabilized. At the same time, locals are asking to close car washes in order to save water. Our journalists found out whether the new water intake near Simferopol will solve the problem.
This place looks like a large-scale excavation, although this is a new waterway that pumps out water from the largest tributary of the Zuya River in the occupied Crimea. Last year, at least 10 rivers dried up in the peninsula.
The Chornorichensk reservoir has practically disappeared, the Simferopol reservoir is almost non-existent, and the Taigan reservoir doesn't provide even 10% of the needs. In fact, I do not even know which reservoirs out of those working before the annexation remain in Crimea now.
Problems with water in the peninsula began after the occupation, when the North Crimean Canal was blocked. However, scientists said that local reservoirs would provide enough water for the needs of local residents.
If we are talking about the fact that the population of Crimea hasn't changed since the times of occupation, and the military-industrial complexes and all military formations would not require the volumes of water they consume every day, then the current volume of water there is enough to provide a significantly better quality of water supply for all civilians of Crimea.
Russia tried to speculate on the resumption of water supply from the Dnieper River, including due to the aggravation of the situation in Donbass. But the position of the Ukrainian authorities remains unchanged. The occupation is first.
I think any attempts of additional pressure from Russia on Ukraine would cause additional international sanctions against the Russian Federation. They need to start thinking about how to leave Crimea and Donbass.
The public opinion on this matter varies.
Why should we supply them with water? They took away our territory, then why do we owe them anything? I think it's necessary to resume water supply. If, in accordance with national legislation, Ukraine considers Crimea an integral part of its territory, then I believe the water should be provided.
For already 6 months, water is being provided according to schedule in Simferopol, Bakhchisarai and other cities and towns of Crimea. In future, this list will only expand, and the only thing the illegal authorities can undertake is to return Crimea under Ukraine's control. Reported by Nick Starkov, Danilo Kobza, UATV News.
Ex-Prime Minister of Ukraine Mykola Azarov was served with a notice of charge in the case of the Kharkiv Agreements, Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine reports. The former official is accused of actions violating the sovereignty of Ukraine by preliminary agreement with the then-president Viktor Yanukovych. In 2010, Azarov made it possible for Yanukovych to sign the so-called Kharkiv Agreements, allowing the Russian Black Sea Fleet to remain in Sevastopol. Subsequently, those accords led to the occupation of Crimea by Russia. Struggle for energy security. The US Senate has introduced an amendment on inadmissibility of the construction of Nord Stream 2 to the bill on support of Ukraine for year 2021. 22 US senators called on the US Secretary of State to strengthen sanctions against companies involved in the buildings of pipeline. Our correspondents have studied the issue.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken promised to impose sanctions on all companies that implement the Nord Stream 2 project, declared the position of the United States during a meeting of NATO foreign ministers.
President Biden has been very clear for a long time in his view that Nord Stream 2 is a bad idea. And I reiterated that view directly to Foreign Minister Mas. And I also made clear that firms engaged in pipeline construction risk U.S. sanctions. The pipeline divides Europe. It exposes Ukraine and Central Europe to Russian manipulation and coercion. It goes against Europe's own stated energy security goals.
In January, the United States imposed new sanctions packages against companies that participate in the Nord Stream 2 project that relate to not only construction of the gas pipeline, but also its maintenance, insurance and certification. Because of this, several dozen European contractors withdrew from the project. Experts say a tough position concerning Nord Stream is important for the United States from a geopolitical point of view.
The plan for this problem is the political influence, the geopolitical position of the countries that are involved in this project, and the Russian influence, given the state to be one of the biggest agents of influence in the world.
However, NATO doesn't still have a consolidated position on Nord Stream 2. Secretary General of the alliance Jens Stoltenberg said they cannot make a decision as this requires a positive response from all members. Germany is the most active in blocking this issue. Our position as the German government is still that extraterritorial sanctions against alliance partners are not a good idea and that the private economic project linked to Nord Stream should be continued. The construction of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Germany across the Baltic Sea started in 2018. According to experts, this project is aimed to stopping the transit of Russian gas to Europe through Ukrainian gas transportation system, as it duplicates its functions.
The Ukrainian gas pipeline was built for one strategic purpose, namely transit. It is clear to everyone that both of these pipelines, the Ukrainian one and the Nord Stream, aren't needed in Europe because gas consumption there is declining every year.
Ukraine defends its position regarding the bypass gas pipeline at all international platforms. If we had not raised this issue, I believe that the stream would have already been completed. Everyone should understand that the construction of a gas pipeline bypassing Ukraine is not only a matter of Ukrainian economy, although it is also very important for us. This is an issue of energy security for the entire Europe. Nord Stream 2 is already 95% complete. Russian companies are continuing the construction. If the construction of the gas pipeline is not stopped, it might be completed in September. But experts say that due to international pressure, the launch may turn out to be unprofitable even for those countries that have already invested in the construction. Reported by Nick Starkov, Yulia Krychkova for UATV News.
$18,132 new cases of COVID-19 registered in Ukraine over the past day. This is the maximum over the entire time of the pandemic. Most of all new cases are observed in Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk and Lviv regions. The day before, the first batch, 215,000 doses of CoronaVac vaccine, arrived in Ukraine from China. The chief state senator doctor of Ukraine noted that the rates of vaccination are growing. At the same time, he reassured everyone who received the first dose of Covishield will receive the second jab as well, despite the temporary suspension of the export of vaccines from India. Drugs of the same formula by different manufacturers are interchangeable, the official says.
Vaccines based on the same platform, like the vector vaccine we're talking about, are interchangeable. Namely, I'm talking about AstraZeneca. It is produced by different companies. Therefore, the vaccine, which is produced at European sites, Korean or Indian sites, can be used for the first vaccination as well as for the second.
The entry rules for foreigners have changed in Ukraine this week. One can enter the country only having a fresh negative COVID-19 test. At the same time, the government cancelled self-isolation for Ukrainians who return from abroad for vaccinations. They will need to provide an invitation to the vaccination site. The invitation should have a unique identification number. A 16-year-old girl from the city of Dnipro has come up with a robot that can help doctors in infectious diseases wards. It will be able to move independently and distribute medicines to patients. This will reduce the number of contacts between the doctors and the infected and accordingly reduce the risk of getting sick. The girl showed her invention to our journalists.
You see different devices here. This is the main controller. There are light and sound sensors.
16-year-old Veronica developed this robot for hospital departments where patients with COVID-19 are treated. The device delivers food and medicine and helps doctors. If necessary, the robot will give a signal.
It has phototransistors that analyze the light buttons and the ward to move to, and can even provide a video conference with the doctor.
Veronica spent a day to develop a robot and only a couple of hours to study the necessary software. The girl says she combined all her favorite hobbies: mechatronics, biology and computer science. The model participated in an online innovation competition and took the second prize.
On the one hand, we expected it, because the girl is very talented. On the other hand, it was an unexpected and very joyful news. We are proud of our student.
Doctors also appreciated the work. They say such assistance, essential in infectious diseases departments, they could significantly reduce the risk of infections for doctors. All the elements of advanced technology are very needed in medicine. Each device is like an additional worker. Every function that can be automatically replaced will help save lives. However, the medical robot still exists only in form of project.
The model I created is quite difficult to implement, and additional knowledge is needed as well.
According to calculations, the model is not cheap, Veronica says. Therefore, she hopes that those who could help turn the project into a startup will be interested in the development.
It's great to understand that you can create something, get funding for it, apply it, and get the result that someone likes it and that the world needs you.
Veronica dreams to become a biotechnology scientist, and she does not exclude that she will be able to create more than one project of a robot that will help doctors save human lives. Reported by Nick Starkov, Natalia Kusak, UATV News.
The youngest team in the history of Ukraine went to the Antarctic station, Academic Vernadsky. This is the 26th expedition. Its average age is 36 and the youngest participant is 25. There are 12 people in the team, including one woman. Moreover, it is already her second expedition at the station. In Antarctica, scientists are engaged in scientific research related to climate change and the response of animals and plants to warming. Also for this hour, more updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for staying with the UATV channel. Goodbye.